Trespassing in a Child's Head Unwillingly by Kitty Cat on AO3. Chapter 27, New Faces. I really don't think I should be here, Izuku whispered, staring at the large mall doors in front of him and Kacchan. People filtered in and out of them, but luckily Izuku didn't recognize any of them. Kacchan snorted, "Get a hold of yourself. It's just a fucking shopping trip. I don't need Jack, so we can always split from the others." He dragged Izuku forward by his wrist, and he reluctantly followed. "But I don't want to pull you away from your friends, though," Izuku tried to reason. "You're my oldest fucking friend. They're just extras." As they approached the large fountain, Izuku caught sight of red hair racing towards them. "Bro, did I just hear you admit you have a friend?" Kirishima yelled, going to wrap an arm around Kacchan's shoulders. Kacchan was faster, though, and ducked under the flying arm, leaving Kirishima to stumble forward, right into where Izuku was still standing. They tumbled, and Izuku managed to roll out from under Kirishima right as he activated his quirk. Kaminari stared down at both of them from where he had run up next to Kacchan. "Nap time?" he asked, plopping himself down beside Kirishima with a large grin. Izuku laughed, shaking his head as he took the hand Kacchan extended to him. "Thanks, Kacchan," he muttered, wiping his hands on his pants. Kacchan grunted before kicking at Kirishima's foot. "Get up," he ordered. Kirishima grunted, popping up to his feet as his quirk deactivated. He reached down to help Kaminari up as well. "Come on, we gotta meet the others," he said, laughing. Kaminari sighed dramatically, taking his hand. Kirishima pulled back, but Kaminari yanked his arm forward, rolled onto his back, and put his feet up. Kirishima yelped, flipping over onto his back as Kaminari rolled to the side and away, laughing loudly. Kirishima flopped back onto the floor, staring up at the ceiling. "I'm done," he said dramatically. "This is where I die." "Get your asses up," Kacchan said, glaring at Izuku when he giggled. "You're causing a fucking scene." "Bakugou," someone yelled, storming up to them. "That kind of language is not becoming of future heroes." Ida yelled, chopping his arm through the air as he quickly approached. He was tailed by what looked like the rest of Class 1A, all staring at the two students laying on the floor. "Kirishima, Kaminari," he yelled, directing it to them. "Get off the floor. This is a public space, and you are being very disrespectful." Yayurozu stepped forward. "Ida, you're being louder than everyone else," she said, and Ida quickly deflated. Kaminari, I got it, Kaminari said, jumping to his feet quickly. Kaminari extended a hand for Kirishima, but he ignored it, standing up himself. Izuku stepped further behind Kacchan as the class dispersed, all standing around each other. "Oh, is this the elusive Midoriya now?" a voice asked, directly behind Izuku. He jumped, whirling around as he threw a punch forward at the voice. Kacchan grabbed his wrist midair, stopping it directly in front of Hagakure's supposed face. She backed up quickly. Conversations halted as the other students stared at Izuku, eyebrows raised. You good?" Ojiro asked, walking over. Izuku quickly nodded, rubbing at his wrist as Kacchan groaned, mumbling a curse under his breath. "What's it to you, three legs?" Kacchan asked, and Ojiro raised his hands in defense, taking Hagakure by the hand and pulling her away. "Sorry," Izuku muttered, rubbing his neck. Kacchan snorted, glaring at the rest of the class. They shrugged, returning to their own conversation. "Don't be doing any of that shit," Kacchan warned, shouldering Izuku. "If Hikage's quirk doesn't work, just assume you're good, okay?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. Izuku hesitantly nodded. "I'm sorry, it's just, no one is going to fucking grab you because of that," Kacchan said, before adding a smile. "Because if they do, I'll blow their fucking brains out." He popped his knuckles and Izuku smiled, leaning onto him slightly. "Ooh," Ashido said, bouncing over. "Look at Kacchan being all cuddly," she announced in a sing-song voice. Izuku smiled sheepishly, standing up by himself. Ashido pouted, her phone halfway out of her pocket, already on her camera app. "If you do that fucking voice again, I will punch you," Kacchan warned, but Ashido waved it off. "So Midoriya," Ashido said, bouncing back onto her heels. "You finally gonna join us? Like, you and not the others? As much as I adore Seven." Izuku nodded before she could say anything else, and she squealed. "Hold on," she yelled, rushing back to the main group. Kacchan did not. He grabbed Izuku by the wrist, at first roughly, but then gently enough he could pull away. "Where are we going?" Izuku called to him as he walked beside him. Kachan shrugged. "Away from the weirdos." He didn't get far before Ashido raced back in front of him, blocking his path. "No, you both are tagging along with us this trip." Kachan tried to sidestep her, and she whipped out her phone. "Or else this photo gets out to the whole school," she threatened. It was a photo of their top bunk that they rarely slept on, piles of plushies covering it. "Those aren't mine," Kachan growled, glaring at her. Izuku knew only about half were his, but it was still more than Kachan would have liked to get out. Ashido zoomed in with a large grin. "Then whose name is scrawled in crayon on the side?" she asked, holding it closer to his face. Kachan went to grab the phone, but she pulled it back with a laugh. "Nope, I have already sent it to myself, and you can't get rid of it." Kachan's fist tightened, but Izuku elbowed him in the side. "If I have to, you have to," he whispered. Kachan flipped him off, but turned on his heel back to the group. "I ain't doing this for you, Pinky," he said over his shoulder, but Ashido had already run back to the group. She drug Uraraka out of the group, pulling her over. "Here," she said, letting go of her, just to go back to the others, discussing where everyone was going. Izuku stared at Uraraka, whose eyes were wide. "What do you want, pink cheeks?" Kachan asked, raising an eyebrow. "Well, actually," Uraraka shifted slightly before looking up at him. "I wanted to ask Midoriya about his notebooks. I've seen him writing in one at lunch, but it didn't look very full. I wanted to know what it was about." Izuku's mouth went dry as Kachan snorted. "Why the fuck?" Before he could say anything else, Kirishima grabbed Kachan's hand. "Sorry, Mito, I gotta steal Baku, bro. I want his opinion on something." Izuku just stared in shock as Kaminari took the other side, and they drug away Kachan as he tried to pull away. Uraraka stuttered, and Izuku turned his attention back to her. "Sorry, I understand that you're shy," and Izuku hesitated before shaking his head with a small laugh. No, it's okay. It's just, I'm not around people often." He rubbed his neck, smiling as best as he could. "Yeah, I can totally talk about my notes. Actually, I have a few ideas on how to help you out as well." Uraraka stared silently for a moment before her grin grew. "Great. I don't really need anything from here. It's all pretty expensive. But can we just talk and walk?" Izuku nodded, looking back to where Kachan had been dragged into a store. "Yeah, I'd like that." Izuku collapsed onto the bench, rubbing his eyes as he yawned. "You all right, Midoriya?" Uraraka asked, sitting beside him. He nodded, trying to stifle another yawn. "Yeah, sorry." He finally smiled at her, leaning back onto his hands. "I just don't go out a lot. It's hard," he finally admitted. And it was. He hated being around people before, but now that he knew people had tried to take him before, he found it more difficult. He hadn't left the house for anything but school the past few days. She nodded. "I'd imagine there's a lot of alters that you have." She laughed slightly, looking up. "It's amazing how you keep it all straight. It'd be pretty difficult, huh?" Izuku nodded. "A bit, but I manage." He paused before digging in one of the shopping bags he had accumulated. The plush took up the majority of it, but it came out of the bag fairly easily. He handed it to Uraraka, who stared at it. "What is... I saw you looking," Izuku said with a shrug. "It's Kirby, right? From that old video game?" Uraraka nodded, laughing slightly. "Why did you get it? I saw the price. This is..." Izuku shook his head, laughing. "Don't worry about it. In case you haven't noticed, me and Kachan aren't exactly struggling. His parents have a pretty good business." Uraraka nodded, squeezing the plush tight. It was about the size of her torso, and the pink matched the pads of her fingers. "Thank you," she said, turning her head to smile at him. He nodded, yawning again as he rubbed his eyes. "I'm so sorry. Do you mind if I take a break?" he asked softly. She nodded. "Of course. Do you, need me to stay here while you switch out, or, No. Kachan would kill me if I switch out," he said with a small chuckle. "But you can go ahead and find the others. I'll be, fine," he decided, shrugging. He knew that at least one vestige was watching his back, but knowing them, the majority were, they had been bugging him to leave the house recently. "Okay," she laughed. "I'll meet you when we all come back." She waved as she raced away, leaving him sitting alone by the fountain. It was nice. His back was turned to the fountain, so the only way someone could show up would be from in front of him. He took a deep breath, shutting his eyes as he focused on the sounds around. The rippling of the water as the fountain's water hit itself, and the calls of children beckoning their parents. It was strange. He knew the truth now. about everything. But there was something still off about it. He didn't know what it was. He paused, listening as a set of footsteps got close before someone groaned, sitting beside him. He wasn't in danger. Ikage's Quirk should have told him. He sat up, opening his eyes to look at the person next to them. Their leg was tucked up, a small game console balanced in their hands. He noticed Izuku's gaze, and the music that had started stopped. "Sorry," he mumbled. This was the only seat open. Izuku glanced around, noticing every bench was full. "You're okay," he said, rubbing his hands. "Just scared me a bit." He chuckled, and the man nodded, turning back to his game. He wasn't really a man. He looked like an older teenager, especially with the game, but his skin was covered in wrinkles and scratches that didn't look quite right. "I don't like staring," he said, glancing up only for a moment before continuing with the game. Izuku jumped, nodding as he looked away. "Sorry, I just, waiting for a friend." Kachan would have to walk by eventually. The other person nodded. "Same." It was silent again, and Izuku yawned, rubbing his eyes. He went to pull out his phone when the man spoke again. "You go to UA?" Izuku frowned before looking down at his bag. Right, he had his ID on the outside. Yeah. Heroes fucking suck." The man put down his game console, paused on what looked like a farming game. Izuku shrugged. "I guess it depends on the heroes. Some do, but some are pretty nice." The man scoffed. "If the fucking symbol of peace isn't a good hero, then what hope is there for the rest?" "All Might?" Izuku asked, and the man scoffed. "Yeah, no, he's an asshole. I can agree with that, but..." Izuku hesitated, tipping his head side to side. "Sometimes he isn't. I mean, how many lives has he saved? How many families get to stay together because of him?" The man paused before huffing. "He's an egotistical idiot. He stopped talking before shaking his head. "I don't know why I thought a hero student would understand. You're the issue." As he spoke, he scratched at his neck, the skin flaking off. "You probably shouldn't do that," Izuku said, which only made him scratch more. "I'm not a hero student. I'm in general studies." He looked away from the man, digging in one of his other bags as he had tucked under the bench. The man scratching paused, and he laughed a little. "You're the useless one who made it to the finals." Izuku didn't even flinch at the term, simply continued his rifling through the bag. Quirkless, and I was. Not anymore. He shrugged, pulling out some lotion he had bought for Kachan's hands for the trip. "Here, it helps with burns and injuries." He offered it to the man, who took it slowly. He stared at it before tucking it into his pocket. "Thanks," he said hesitantly. "Who gave you a quirk?" "It wasn't Mass Tomaru," another man whispered, setting a hand on the older teenager's shoulder. "There you are." His face was hidden under a hoodie, and his hands were gloved. Maybe he had the same condition as the teenager. He did sound old enough to be his father. The teenager shrugged off the hand, glaring up at him. "This isn't him, but he says..." "Enough," the man said, his voice tight. "It's time to go. We've been here too long." His voice was quiet now, almost too quiet for Izuku to hear, despite being nearby. The teenager huffed, but tucked away the game without even turning it off. "Thanks for the lotion," he muttered, standing up with another groan. "Nerd!" Kachan yelled, and Izuku jumped, turning away from the two of them. "The fuck you doing?" he yelled, slowly getting closer. Izuku waved him over, standing up. "I was talking to..." He turned around, and the man and the teenager were both gone. "Huh," he muttered, frowning. "Where the fuck have you been?" Kachan asked, looking down at the bags Izuku had accumulated. "Why do you have an entire bag for a box of Pockies?" he asked, picking them out of his bag. Izuku shrugged, glancing around for the two people who had disappeared. He shook his head, turning back to Kachan. "I got something for Araka that she liked." Kachan snorted, flicking him in the forehead. He frowned, rubbing at it. "What was that for?" "Stop flirting with people. You got too much shit to worry about," he warned. Izuku shook his head. "What do you mean? I wasn't "Fuck, you weren't," he said loudly, grinning. "You got at least 2 people in my class thinking you're cute, which is fucking weird." Izuku frowned, shaking his head. "Hey, you're not one to talk. Ashido thinks your legs are hot." Kachan paused before laughing out loud, shaking his head. "What the fuck are you doing, talking about me with them?" he asked, his laughter dying down. Before Izuku could respond that it was an accident, someone else walked up. "Bakugou." Midoriya, Todoroki said, walking over. Izuku stared at him for a second without speaking. His father was the number 2 hero, Endeavor, which meant he could somewhat understand it, right? Endeavor was public about it, so are you All Might's secret love child? Izuku's brain shut off. What? He whispered, staring at Todoroki, who gave him absolutely no expression. He tried to stutter before Todoroki spoke again. Bakugou, are you All Might's secret love child? Kacchan's brain processed faster than Izuku's could. The fuck you talking about, half and half? He asked, crossing his arms. You know I'm fucking your Quirk, he said, with no inflection. It's like All Might's. Izuku frowned as Kacchan shook his head. No, the fuck it's not. Have you seen my fucking Quirk work? Todoroki shook his head. Not the explosions. Everything else. You punch like him. He tipped his head slightly. Kacchan didn't say anything, and Izuku frowned, elbowing him. Sorry, Todoroki, he said with a small laugh. I know Kacchan's dad. He looks a bit like him, not like All Might. Plus, his Quirk isn't like All Might's at all. He smiled at the boy, but he didn't smile back. I thought I was right, he whispered, before turning and walking away back to Ira. Izuku watched him go before letting out a breath. Oh my god, I thought he knew, he whispered, rubbing his eyes. Come on, Kacchan, let's head out. He paused, looking around. Wait, where's Kirishima and Kaminari? Kacchan grinned as he took the box of Pockies and opened it. I ditched them, he said, walking away. Kacchan, Izuku called after him, grabbing the 2 bags. You can't just do that. He followed Kacchan out, laughing at him. This next bit takes place while Izuku was talking to Uraraka. Die! Nana yelled, punching his shoulder. Daigoro jumped out of his sleep, shoving Nana away. Look! She laughed, pointing out the view. Daigoro yawned, looking at the viewpoint. Izuku was talking to the brunette, discussing how her quirk could be used in combat in more versatile ways. I thought we agreed to give the kids some space, he asked, looking over to Nana's large grin. She waved her hand. It's fine. Someone has to make sure he's not getting into more trouble. Daigoro raised an eyebrow, but she ignored it. Just look! He's talking to a girl. Daigoro looked back over, frowning. He's critiquing her fighting style, he corrected. She slapped him on the shoulder, and he laughed, shrugging. Let me be happy for the baby, all grown up. You gonna let me sleep? He asked, with the same tone. Nana laughed, nodding. Yeah. Okay, I don't know if I have much to say to this one. We are getting really close to the, what's written, which means I actually gotta, finish the story. I don't want to. Because we're on 27 of 32, so we are getting really close. 32 is a really long one, though, so, so Uraraka and Izuku. The girl thinks he's cute, but you gotta keep in mind, she doesn't really know Izuku. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Izuku. She knows, like, the other alters who have been there. So it's just more of a passing thing. Because in her mind, Izuku was actually the one who saved her during the entrance exam. But I think she realizes here that it's not... Is that a spider on my wall? That it's not who she thinks it is. So her crush isn't anything serious. It won't go into a relationship. It's not as bad as it is in canon, whatever. People just think Izuku's cute or interesting or whatever because of all his notes, which is why she then changed that is 100% a spider up there, changed the conversation back to her notes. And then Izuku and Tomura, it's so here he may have had the idea of going for Bakugou, but considering Bakugou was with the 2 others and wasn't really alone, he kind of wasn't able to catch him at all. So he kind of just gave up and went on Stardew Valley, because it's 100% Stardew Valley he was playing. And he just happened to sit by Izuku, and they had a little talk, and Kurogiri whisked him away. Sorry, that spider is moving closer. Anyways, I think that might be it. Oh, so Izuku's, I feel like it's kind of implied, but is really nervous about going out in public simply because he knows if there's someone who knows that he's All Might's kid, he's going to be in trouble, because now it's like ingrained in him. Because the few times people knew he was All Might's kid, he got in trouble. I mean, even a time when someone didn't know he was All Might's kid, he still got grabbed out on the street. He's just a magnet for trouble. And then Nana, just having her little blurb with Die at the end. I love her. I didn't know how to really start. Oh, I'm sorry about that noise spike if there is one. Anyways, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next one, 28.